It was the sound of a golden retriever refusing to move that woke the whole house. Not a bark, a slow, deliberate, low sound in the back of the throat that Maisie had never made in the 4 years Odalys Fontenot had lived with her. Odalys was a food scientist, 14 years at a regional laboratory that tested consumer products for trace contamination. She read labels for a living. She read them at the grocery store. She read them at other people's houses. She had built her son's entire diet on labels. Every ingredient checked, every source verified, every batch confirmed. Her son Remy was 20 months old, brown-eyed, with a mop of curls that refused to be tamed. He had a confirmed severe tree nut allergy, diagnosed at 8 months. The house was a nut-free house. She had made sure of it. Maisie was their 4-year-old golden retriever. She weighed 68 pounds and had never guarded food in her life. She was famous in the neighborhood for the fact that if you gave her a treat, she would look at you as if she was checking you had meant to do that, and then eat it slowly, as if unwilling to seem greedy. She had loved Remy since the day he came home from the hospital, which was why what she began doing that Wednesday made absolutely no sense. The visit had begun on Sunday. Odalys's mother had flown in from Marseille for 2 weeks. She had brought a suitcase full of things her grandson had never had: small French cookies, a jar of chestnut cream, a package of children's cereal in a bright yellow box with a cartoon squirrel. Odalys read all of the labels the moment the suitcase was open. She saw no tree nut warnings. Almonds? No. Cashews? No. Walnuts? No. The cereal was oat-based. The cookies were butter and flour. Nothing flagged. The bowl was set on the coffee table Wednesday morning. Remy's small yellow plastic bowl, half filled with the French cereal his grandmother had brought. He sat on the rug with his sippy cup. Maisie crossed the living room. She positioned herself between Remy and the coffee table. Odalys said, "Maisie, move." She did not move. Odalys said it a second time and clapped once. Maisie looked at her. Maisie did not move. Odalys reached across the dog to hand Remy the bowl. Maisie stood up and turned her whole body to physically block the transfer, her flank pressing against Odalys's arm. Remy started crying, the frustrated cry of a hungry toddler seeing his food held out of reach. Maisie held her position. Her mother, watching from the couch, said the word Odalys did not want to hear. Resource guarding. She wants the food. Odalys knew every article on resource guarding. She had read them all when they had brought Remy home 4 years into life with Maisie. She had watched the training videos. She knew the escalation curve. She knew what the first signs looked like. This looked, from every angle her training had taught her, exactly like the first signs. She picked Remy up, moved him to the kitchen, and gave him the cereal there. Maisie followed. Maisie sat in the kitchen doorway and watched them. When Remy reached for the bowl, Maisie stood up and made the low sound in the back of her throat. Odalys pulled the bowl away. Remy cried harder. Maisie sat back down. Odalys tried again. Maisie stood up again. For 6 days it went on like that. Every meal that involved the yellow cereal box or the cookies. Maisie between the toddler and the food. Maisie in the doorway. Maisie making the low sound. Maisie refusing to move. By Sunday night, Odalys and her husband Everard had a decision drafted. They loved Maisie. They had planned to keep her forever, but they had a 20-month-old with a severe allergy in the house, and a dog who had suddenly, at 4 years old, developed food-related behavior, and the calculus a parent has to do sometimes is not a calculus you get to negotiate. They had emailed the Golden Retriever Rescue. The rescue had a spot in a foster home for the following weekend. If you stay for stories about what animals sense before we do, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Monday morning, her mother said something at breakfast that later Odalys would replay in her head every day for the rest of her life. In France, they use hazelnut flour in that cereal, Sherry. Very fine, almost invisible. It is a common substitute for regular flour there. Did you check the small print? Odalys did not answer. She got up from the table. She walked into the living room. She picked up the yellow box. She turned it over. She read the ingredients again, this time all the way through, past the bold printed list, into the smaller print at the bottom where the allergen declaration was written. Contains hazelnut flour. She read it a second time, a third. She had missed it. 6 days of feeding a nut-allergic toddler cereal made with hazelnut flour, and the only reason he had not had an anaphylactic reaction was that Maisie had physically prevented every single spoonful from reaching his mouth. She sat down on the rug. She did not stand up for a long time. Maisie came over and sat beside her and put her head very lightly on Odalys's knee and did not move. Later, when Odalys had stopped shaking enough to call the veterinary allergen consultant, Dr. Yannick Solberg, Canine Olfactory Science, Uppsala, he explained what had been happening for 6 days. Dogs can be trained to detect trace tree nut proteins, but many dogs living with a nut-allergic child will develop the recognition on their own, simply by learning to associate a particular scent with the family's changed behavior. Maisie had learned over the 20 months of Remy's life what a nut-free environment smelled like. When the French cereal entered the house, she had smelled something the household had never contained before. She had done the correct thing. Every time. Another spoonful, Dr. Solberg said, and you would be having a very different conversation with an emergency team right now. Has your dog ever done something you couldn't explain until it was the only thing that made sense? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. Odalys canceled the email to the rescue. She threw the yellow box in the trash and washed her hands twice. She got down on the rug beside Maisie, and she put her arms around the dog's shoulders, and she pressed her face into the golden fur, and she stayed there for a long time. "I'm sorry," she said. "I am so sorry, Maisie. You told me every single day." Maisie did not move. She let Odalys hold her. She looked at Remy across the rug, playing with a wooden block, and Odalys felt the dog exhale against her collarbone. A long, slow release of tension the dog had been carrying for 6 days without anyone noticing. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. The next one involves a Bernese mountain dog who spent an entire evening staring at the kitchen ceiling, the reason nobody would ever forget.